Hello everybody and welcome to the Carlam Cymru revision sessions. The session this evening will focus on English GCSE and will be presented by Miss Tracy Hales from e-sgol Maes y Derwen in Ystrad Gynlais. The session will last about 45 minutes where Miss Hales will run through the relevant content with you. During the session, if you have any questions, please use the question and answer, the Q&A, which is at the top of the screen, and we will do our best to answer you. You will see that there's a hyperlink in that Q&A section at the moment. I put that in there to encourage you to leave your name and email address by clicking on the link, and we can then keep you updated about any future events. You can click on the link at any time during the session. Now, today's session will be recorded, and the recording and any relevant resources will be uploaded to the e-sgol website under the Carlam Cymru tab. So, thank you, Miss Hales. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon and welcome to the revision session this evening. Today we're going to focus on the Unit 2 and we're going to focus on the writing section of Unit 2. So we've split it down, and last week we did the Unit 2 revision on the reading section. So if you wanted to catch up on that, you just need to go and visit the Carlam Cymru website and you'll be able to find that reading section. But tonight we're going to just look at the writing. So my name's Miss Hales. As Miss has just said, please feel free to use the Q&A functions if you want to ask any questions. We are going to be about 45 minutes and we're just going to look at the writing section, basically looking at what sort of questions could you be asked and how do you answer the writing section. Okay, so we did this last week looking at the reading, and I just thought it's really useful. I think sometimes you forget what the papers look like. So it's always worth checking. It's a Unit 2 paper. You're going to have description, narration and exposition. And this means that in the writing section, you could be asked any one of those to write your task. Remember, this is the one where you're going to get a choice and you choose one writing task to do. So you've got a choice, but any of those three could show up on the exam. So it's really important you remember that. We're only going to look at the writing today. And it obviously tells you that you're going to need black pens and you're going to need some highlighters if that helps you. You might like to do some planning using highlighters in your exam, and that is perfectly acceptable. If you've got that ready, you just write plan at the top and you do your planning down. You need to know how much you write in about 45 minutes, and it would be really good for you to be practicing and looking at how much space that 350 to 500 words takes you. You've got that limit in the exam, and it's really useful to be able to gauge how far you're doing, to be able to monitor your own length and to know how much you're doing. So it's between 350 and 500 words that you need on this paper. So back to those basics, you need to read all the instructions. You've got to use black pen. It's really, really important that you do. Make sure you fill in the relevant data, and for the writing section, write down which question number you're taking, which choice you've chosen. Make sure you do both the proofreading and the editing section on this paper. It can make a difference. You can gain or lose 10 marks just by doing that proofreading and editing section. So make sure you cover all the bits of the paper. And then when it comes to the writing section, it's one task from a choice of two. So you'll be able to choose which one you're going to do. Make it easy on your examiner and they'll be looking for you to give you rewards. Right, organising your time. How are you going to use your time in the exam? You need to monitor your own time. You've got 2 hours. You'll get a warning when you're coming close to the 2-hour ending, but you won't be told when it's time to move from section A to section B. So you won't be told when to move from the reading to the writing. You've got to monitor that for yourself. So really, in the exam, you want to be spending about the same amount of time on section A and section B because they're both worth 40 marks. So there's 80 marks available for this paper, 40 marks for the reading and 40 marks for the writing. On this section, on this paper only, so on the Unit 2, you've got 2 things to do on section B. You've got to do the proofreading first and then the writing. And obviously the writing should take you the most time. All right, so it shows you there, look, about 10 minutes doing the proofreading, about 10 minutes planning, and about 40 minutes writing. I would suggest splitting it up a tiny little bit differently to save yourself some time to proofread your own work as well. And that's one of the reasons why proofreading is in this exam, to try and make you aware of your own writing. So one of the things you're going to have to do is proofread and make sure you've got your capital letters and your full stops in the right places. Okay. Okay, so the proofreading, it's a nice and straightforward task. But what they ask you to do is they ask you to circle the mistakes and then underneath write out the corrections. And they want you to do it in the order in which they appear in the text. Again, it's making your examiner's life easier. So you'd read over and you'd be looking for any mistakes. Now, the first mistake I noticed when I start looking at this one, it was then that I noticed Titus was acting strangely. If I look at that, I can see that the I is a lowercase I. Well, I know that anytime I write I need a capital letter. So I know that's a mistake. So that's my first one. I'm going to circle it. Okay, so I'm going to keep reading. He was sweating heavily and he started to shake and tremble. He went really pale and started behaving oddly. I haven't noticed anything odd there. I asked him what were wrong. Ah, right, okay, I know that's a mistake. I asked him what was wrong. I know that doesn't make sense if I've got were instead of was. So I asked him what was wrong, and he told me to shut up or he'd punch me. Okay, there's a comma there. That shouldn't be a comma. It's got a capital letter straight after it. I know it should be a full stop. When I looked shocked, he burst into tears and said he was feeling dizzy and weak. Okay, now that sounds right, but looking at that word weak, I know that's not spelt correctly, so I'm going to highlight that one as well. I asked him if he'd taken his insulin, but he seemed confused. After a short while, I realised that he was showing the early signs and symptoms of suffering from a hypo. Okay, that realise isn't right. I know that that should be past tense because everything else has been past tense. Up here, I've got I noticed, started, so therefore I know that that realise should be realised. So now I've found them, now I need to write them out. So the I becomes a capital, were becomes was, punch me has got a full stop at the end of it, weak is the EAK, not the double E, and then realise has got a D on the end to make it past tense. Please note that as I'm writing this, I'm keeping my letters the same as the ones that are there. So if it's a capital letter in the text and it's correct, then I'm making sure that I keep that capital as well. If it's a lowercase letter, I'm making sure I keep it a lowercase letter. I need to match my case to the exam text. Okay, so here's one for you to have a go at now. Circle the 5 errors and write them correctly in the spaces below. If you want to have a go at this now, if you pause the video, you will be able to find those mistakes and you'll be able to correct them. On the next slide, I will go over the answers. So if you pause now, you can have a go at this one. Okay, so if you've paused, you've now looking for the answers. So I need 5 again. Our school have decided to take part in the reverse Advent calendar appeal. Reverse Advent calendar appeal is perfectly okay because it's capital letters, it's the title. However, our school have decided, our school has decided. Calendar is actually spelt wrong, so it needs a capital letter. I've got to keep that capital C when I write it out, but I want the AR instead of the ER. So our school has decided to take part in the reverse Advent calendar appeal for our local food bank. It is hoped that each form will discuss this during tutor time and organise themselves to complete this task. That shouldn't be a capital letter. It should, it shouldn't be a question mark. It should be a full stop. So I'm not sure how you'd write that out, but I've written it there and I've shown it. Donations such as dried foods, okay, I know that doesn't look right. I know that's spelt wrong. So dried should be with an IE, not a Y. Donations such as dried foods, tinned goods and toiletries would be gratefully received. Okay, now if I remember my spelling rules from primary school, I before E except after C, received therefore is spelt wrong in this instance. Okay, so hopefully you've got 5 out of 5 there and you've found all the mistakes. And again, look, you've got that reminder there. Please keep the capital and lowercase letters the same as in the text, unless you're correcting a mistake, obviously. So in this particular example, calendar, needs a capital C because you're correcting the spelling error, you're not correcting a capital letter error. It's really, really important. You actually wouldn't get the mark if you didn't keep the capitals and the lowercase as they should be. Okay, so let's have a think about it. Why do students lose marks in the writing section? Lots and lots of reasons why people lose marks. But what do the exam boards say you need to do? Obviously, if you don't have enough practice, then practicing at home is going to really help you. You can practice your planning, you can practice developing ideas, you can practice sentence structures. You don't have to sit down and write the whole exam paper every single time. You can do lots of little tasks to help you instead. Loss of teaching time is a big one. Try and attend all your lessons, make sure you're doing all your classwork and your homework. Accuracy on the writing section is really, really important. Make sure you're checking and proofreading. Being accurate with your sentencing, your grammar, your spelling and your punctuation makes a massive difference here. You need to be confident that you are doing the best that you can. Check for your common errors. Make sure you know when to put a full stop in. Make sure you know when to change into a new paragraph. Those are things that you can do for yourself. Quality of ideas and content means that you would really benefit from having a range of ideas ready. Think about this exam, prepare for it. You can practice writing lots of different ways in order to be ready for this exam. It's really hard in the exam to write under timed constrictions, so make sure that you're practicing at home. Write under strict time constrictions or restrictions. Give yourself half an hour to write a letter. Try and write a story in 45 minutes. Make sure you set those alarms and practice them. In the exam, if you try and use a range of sentences and vocabulary, you are automatically reaching up towards that band 4 where it says that you use a variety of sentences and language and punctuation for effect. That means you're automatically trying to aim towards the higher grades. So practice it. How do you change a sentence round? Is there any another way you can start that sentence? Can you use a variety of openings for your paragraphs? Can you use some short and long sentences? Just practice doing those sorts of things. Structure and organisation is something we're going to work on today. It's one of the things that I'm going to be revising with you, but making sure that you've got a purpose for your writing, that you know your audience and that you plan it out can make a massive difference to your writing. Planning will really help before you start writing. Don't just sit there in the exam and go straight into the task. Always make sure you spend at least 5 minutes thinking about what you want to say and thinking about the way that you want to say it. And obviously in the exam, please make sure you understand what you're being asked to do before you start. Read that question over and over again, just to make sure you're comfortable with what you're being asked to do. Okay, so what does the examiner say? Well, the examiner says read the question at least twice. That's a given. Make sure you generate some ideas and then think about the sequencing and progression. So yes, you need to plan, but actually your planning should include what order are those ideas going to go in. Give some thought to your beginning and your ending. Because if you think about it, if an examiner is not sure about the grade they're going to give you, they will reread part of your answer and they often will go back to the beginning and back to the end. They will reread the opening and the ending of your work to see how well you've managed those. So they're ones that are worth getting absolutely spot on. And then obviously think about how you're going to develop it. Make sure you keep a close eye on your time, and if you realise you're running out of time, can you adapt your writing? Can you cut one of your ideas out? Can you make sure you do your most important idea first, so that if you do run out of time, you've covered the important ideas? And then please proofread. You need to ensure that you've got a really clear focus in your writing and that you are accurate. Really, really important. Okay, so what is the exam like? This is what your question will look like. In the task, you will be assessed for the quality of your writing skills. Okay, clear. Focus on the writing skills. 20 marks are awarded for communication and organisation. 15 marks are awarded for writing accurately. So you are being rewarded for your accuracy in your writing in this section. 350 to 500 words, which is why it's important to know how much that takes. And then you get your choice. Now, because last week we did everything related to festivals, I've chosen to do the writing tasks this week on the festivals. So if you want ideas for your writing, you could go back and check the reading resources from last week and you will find material on festivals. There were 5 different texts about festivals. Because that's how the exam works. They will give you texts on a topic. Then they will ask you to write about that topic. So you're able to use the material from the reading paper in your writing paper. So your ideas, in a way, are presented to you in the reading section, and you can use that material. The idea being that you get inspiration from that. You don't just copy them. Yeah, so it's a given, really, that you're not just going to copy what the exam has given you. So you have 2 tasks here. One says write a diary entry or blog post describing your experience at a festival. So remember, this paper is description, narration or exposition. Well, that's a description, isn't it? Describing your experience at a festival. The second choice, write an article for a local paper explaining your views on the proposals for a music festival in your area. You can be positive or negative about the proposal. Okay, explaining your views. Well, I know that that means an exposition, because if I'm explaining how I feel, then I'm exposing my viewpoint to a wider audience, and I am basically writing about how I feel. So there's 2 there. One is a description, one is an exposition. So in this paper, I've not been asked about narration. Okay, that's fine. I've been given 2 choices. One is the description, one is the exposition. Okay, so this is the mark scheme, so you can use this to have a look. You want to be aiming for band 4 or above if you're aiming for a C or above. Okay, so if you look at the band 4, it talks about controlled and well-judged writing. It talks about developing ideas with detail, some originality and imagination. It talks about a purposeful structure and a clearly organised piece which gives sequence and fluency. So obviously, in order to get a C, you need to know what you're writing, you need to understand the topic, and you need to structure your ideas. So really nice, clear paragraphing. And then in terms of the writing accuracy, a wide range of vocabulary, varied sentencing, sentence construction is secure, range of punctuation used accurately. And then this one, spelling, including that of irregular words, is secure. It still doesn't say totally accurate, it says secure, that you know what you're doing, that you're comfortable, that you're secure in your spelling. Okay. So have a look at that and think about what that means for you. Perhaps you need to set yourself some targets. Perhaps you need to think about improving certain areas of your own writing. It can be really useful to look at that exam criteria and think about exactly what you need to reach that band 4 and make it personal. Think about what you do in your writing. Okay, so 2 sets of marks, 1 for your ideas, 1 for your accuracy. Plan your work, proofread your answer. Really, really important. Okay, so in the exam, remember what and how. The what is your content. So the what is your ideas and your structure. The how is how you write it, your paragraphing, your punctuation, your sentencing, your word choices, the details and effects that you put in. So in the exam, the what is what you start with. You plan it out, you get your ideas down. And then the how is the balance that you make between the way that you write and the way that you try and engage your reader. So you try and make it interesting. And this is one way that you can do it. I don't know if your teacher does this with you, but I do this with all of my classes. I think this is really important. I've even started trying to introduce this down into year 7 now, because I think it's so important that if you're writing, you understand this. So if you use this as a way of starting your exam, you'd write PAFT down your page, and then you think, right, why am I writing? Who is the audience for which I'm writing? What am I writing? So what is my format? And the tone, what tone of voice am I using? Okay, it's a really quick plan and it's a really good plan for focusing your ideas, because the examiner is really looking to make sure that you know the purpose and that you understand who you're writing for. And then obviously, if you've written a descriptive piece of writing for the exposition, then you're not matching the format. So you're just thinking about simple little things like making sure that in the description you describe and in the exposition you explain your ideas. Okay, so PAFT is a really good way to get a really quick plan done before you start writing. These are some of the questions that you could ask yourself when you're starting. So why am I writing? What do I want to achieve? What do I want the reader to do as a result of reading my text? That's my purpose. Okay, so purpose, audience, format, tone, and these are the sorts of questions that you can use. You could answer those questions. You could print this out. You could stick this by the side of your writing tasks when you're doing your writing. There's all sorts of ways you can use this, but it just helps you to think about your task before you start. So let's have a look at what PAFT actually means. So here is a question. The local council are proposing to create a music festival in your area. You've been asked to write an article for your local paper to express your views. So purpose of that, exposition. You've been asked to express your views. You've got to give your opinion. Who's my audience? Right, okay, it's a local newspaper, but because it's a newspaper, it's going to be adults reading it, probably. But because it's local, it means I can talk about local issues. I can talk about my local area. I can talk about events that have happened previously and make references to those things to make it more personalised. Format, I've got to write an article. It says write an article. It's going to be pretty formal because it's for a paper, but it is going to be expressing my views, so it can be personal. Tone, formal. It's emotive, but because I'm expressing my views, it's okay to be biased. I don't necessarily have to balance my arguments here. I can say how I feel about it. All right, so that's just one way to approach it, and just doing that quickly in the exam might make the difference for you in terms of preparing yourself for the task that you're about to do. So I need to plan now. So my PAFT is a quick one. That's my quick starter just to get myself focused. This is how I plan now. So I know I need to have 5 paragraphs because that's what I always tell my classes to do. 5 paragraphs gives me a good chance to develop my ideas. So introduction, who am I, where am I from, why am I interested in this? What do I actually think about the festival? Then I could do a very easy positive views of the festival. What's it going to bring to our local area? Why is this a good thing? And if I'm positive about it, then I can make that quite a substantial paragraph. Now, if I'm positive about it, I could acknowledge the negative views. I know some people will say that traffic will be bad. However, if we do this, that, or the other, we can prevent that traffic chaos. So if I'm positive about something, I'm even going to turn my negatives into positives as well. So I'm going to counter argue. I'm going to give the negative and I'm going to undermine that negative view. Then I might write something about where I think the festivals should be located, or I might write something about the music I think should be in it, how they engage with the local population. I've got lots of different things I could do in the 4th paragraph. Then the 5th paragraph is going to be my conclusion. It's going to be me summing up my key points and what I hope for the future of this music festival. Okay. All right, so if you wanted to have a practice of that, why don't you have a go at writing that article for a local newspaper, expressing your views, spend about 20 minutes on it, 5 minutes planning, 5 minutes proofreading. That would mean that you'd have about a page and a half, which would be just under the word recommendation for this particular paper. Okay, so you could pause now and you could have a go at that. But now I'm going to talk you through the different types of writing on this exam. So we've got about 20 minutes left, so I'm going to talk you through what each of these means and how you would approach this in the exam. So you've got a description, a narration, and an exposition, and those are the 3 different types of writing you could be asked to do. So when we talk about description, we mean writing focused on details, talking about emotions and senses. When we talk about narration, we talk about a piece of writing which is focused on characters and events. When we talk about exposition, we talk about offering our opinions. So they're different, slightly different. There's not huge differences, but they are different. So what I thought I would offer you is some suggested features for each type of writing. So when you're writing an exposition, you're looking at keeping it in the simple present tense. It's a good thing to use cause and effect language, so because, if, therefore. It's good to use time or causal connectives, so things like next, then finally, it's going to be a formal piece of writing. When you're offering your point of view, it's going to be formal. It's going to be written in the third person, but you can write it in the first person as well. So as you just saw with the music festival, you can write that and offer your own opinions. But one of the things about an exposition piece is that you're going to try and use some technical vocabulary to fit your topic. So the examiner gives us some explanations to try and show us what exposition means. Can you see the first one? So it says it's an essay which illustrates, explains and illuminates an idea. So you need a clear line of thinking which develops through definition, comparison and contrast, example, statistics and explanations of effect and implications. So in other words, you are getting your idea, you are developing your idea, and you're trying to show why you think that. It's an essay. You're just exploring your own point of view. It's one of the easier ones to do, but it's one of the ones that we're least familiar with. It's explaining something. But you need that clear statement because otherwise you just don't have an essay. You have an introductory paragraph and then a concluding paragraph in where you sum everything up. Always imagine that the reader doesn't have much knowledge on the subject and you are providing the information. You're explaining your point of view. So what sort of tasks are going to come up on the exam? Write an essay expressing your views on. Write a leaflet explaining. Explain, that keyword explain. Okay, so exposition, you're giving your viewpoint, you're explaining what you think. So a comprehensive explanation of an idea or theory. So you absolutely need to plan for this one. You could take the title and you could outline your reasons why you think that, I mean, this one was a title about why is money important to a teenager. But you could take a balanced point of view, write about why it's important to some, but not others. You could take a completely positive view or a completely negative view. You're not trying to persuade when you're doing an exposition task. You're just trying to be articulate about what you think. So how could you start these? How could you plan for an exposition? So introduction. State your opinion. That's quite nice, isn't it? What do I think? Engage with the topic. Show what it means to me. And then if I aim for 3 main paragraphs, each of which starts with a main topic sentence, which I then develop with evidence and statistics and anecdotes. Remember, anecdotes are stories about how it involves you. And then the implications of it. I've then gone through my point and I've made sure I've really developed it. And if I do that 3 times with 3 different ideas, then I should be saying enough. And then I conclude it and I sum up my main points. So this is a really good way to think about it. So you start with your topic sentence. What is your main point on this? Then I say why I think that. I give evidence for it. I give some statistics or some facts and figures. I use some stories about how it relates to me or somebody in my family or somebody locally. And then I talk about the implications. What does this mean? So always aim for those 3 main paragraphs as a minimum. Think about this as your plan for exposition writing. So this is what it looks like. You make your statement, you explain it, you give examples, you explain the possible consequences, you use a story, and then you explain what it means for you. You could then state a statistic. That's not an easy thing to say. State a statistic. And then why is that statistic important? Okay, why is it important that 95% of people think this? Or why is it important that 8 out of 10 of your year group have believed this in the past? Explain how big or small it is, state the implications, link it to your point, back it up with an expert. Why not get an expert opinion in it? And then explain how this supports your point of view. So can you see here, you've got 2 very different ways to go about expanding your sentences, expanding your ideas. So this is what's really important in this exam, is to make sure you expand, you develop the point and you explain it in detail. This is another way that you could do it. So you take your initial feeling about this discussion, about the statement. That's your introduction. And then here you have 3 or 4 main reasons, which you then explain and develop using the structure you've just seen, and then a conclusion. Okay, so hopefully That's helping you to think about how I'm going to break this down. You've got to have the ideas, and then you break it down and you make sure you've got 3 things to say about those ideas. So for the highest marks, that band 4, that band 5, you must show that you can expand on your ideas. So you're not just going to say, oh, you need to eat a healthy diet or you're going to be ill. You're going to say, being aware of the importance of eating a well-balanced diet is essential for health and well-being throughout our life. Those who do not choose to eat a healthy diet are far more likely to be afflicted by a wide range of illnesses such as diabetes, heart disease, and high blood pressure. There's my point, there's my explanation, there's my evidence, there's my examples. I'm building up my ideas. Yeah. Okay, so how are you going to start a piece of writing? How are you going to write your intro? Here are 4 ways that you can start a piece of exposition writing. You can start with a declarative statement. You can start with a rhetorical question. You can start with a single word and an explanation. You can start with tripling. So each of those now, you've got an example of them with a definition of what they are. Okay, so it's a really good way to think about it. And if you had a topic, so say, for example, our music festival example, why don't you start with a declarative statement along the lines of our local area is in desperate need of some improvements, and an injection of finances from a tourism boosting festival would be great. There is my declarative statement. Yeah. So think about these. There's 4 different ways that you can start there with 4 examples. The examples on this one were to do with tattoos and the opinions of the general public on tattoos. Okay, so here is a good example of what it would look like if you were going to do the article on the music festival. So we've got 2 paragraphs from a piece here. Please note that they are an extract from this. They are not the full piece. There isn't 350 to 500 words here. Okay, so this is just an example of what's gone well. So this candidate has used personal opinions and first person. A recent proposal by our local council is a music festival to be held in Cyfarthfa Park. This would seem to be a fantastic idea. I know that I and my fellow Year 11 pupils would definitely attend the festival. So it's personal, they're engaged, yeah, first person. It's a positive response and they offer reasons why. So they talk about tourism, they talk about the need to improve the local area. They acknowledge the opposite view. I know that some people will complain about the potential traffic chaos, and then they go on to undermine that, and they offer a compromise and a solution to one issue. So they talk about the noise levels, and they talk about how possibly, if you wanted to, you could have a curfew and then have a silent disco at the end so that there would be no noise pollution. So what would they improve? How could they improve it? This candidate didn't put a headline on their article. So in order to show that it's an article, put a headline on it. You could have a main headline and a subheading. They also would need it to be a lot longer. Obviously, this was an extract from it. There were 3 more paragraphs to this one. Okay, so did they reach the band 5? Did they get up to the AA star? Maybe they're on their way, but it's useful to have a think about that and look at what you need for the AA star there. Okay, so now I'm going to whiz through description and narration because I think these are the 2 that you are probably more familiar with. These are the 2 that you've been doing since you were in Year 7. So always worth looking at the exposition, one that can be really easy to do and one that a lot of people avoid, but it's just explaining your point of view. So description and narration are the other 2 types of writing that you could be asked in this exam. So what is it? Well, a good narrative is going to use description. So a good story is going to use description to show, not tell, because that's going to be more engaging, it's going to be lively, it's going to be interesting. The main focus of a narrative, a story, is the characters, what they think and they feel. The main focus of a description is the detail, the description, using the 5 senses. So what's the main difference between them? Well, do you know what? Don't worry about it. The main difference between them, a narrative is a story. It focuses on action, the characters, how they feel, what they're doing. The main focus of a description is the detail that you go into. You zone in on a little tiny detail. Okay, so what do they look like on the page? If you're doing a descriptive piece, it's usually easier to do it in the past tense. It's often easier to do it in the first person, but the third person is also okay. It needs to be lively and interesting. You use the 5 senses. This is where the description, the descriptive piece becomes very focused on the use of the senses. What can you touch? What can you smell? What can you see? What can you hear? That way you know you're writing a description. Try and use similes and metaphors, look for your adjectives, try and use a variety of sentencing, and try and use perhaps some hyperbole where you over-exaggerate some of the things that you're doing. What does a story look like? A story is definitely easier in the past tense. Story could be first or third person. That's fine. You could focus on your own experiences or you could describe somebody else's. Either's okay. A story's going to have time connectives. At first, then, next, suddenly, meanwhile. It's going to be in chronological order. You're going to try and make it lively. You might include a tiny bit of dialogue. Don't include too much. You are going to use similes and metaphors still. You're going to think about your adjectives and you're going to vary your sentencing. When you've got the narration, it is focusing on things which are a little bit more believable, a bit more true to life. They give you simpler titles. They're looking for you to try and be a little bit more focused on things which are perhaps more true to life. They don't really want you to have a varied chronology. They don't want your time shifts and your flashbacks. They don't want that. They just want a simple narrative, and usually past tense is really useful. Basically, it's more functional, less imaginative. So what sort of things could you be asked in the exam? Write an article for a travel magazine describing somewhere interesting that you visited. Describe an occasion when technology made a difference to your life. Describe an occasion when you did something you found rewarding. Describe a time when you faced a challenge. Yeah, so those are your description ones. So what's that look like? If you break it down, how are you going to do it? So I'm describing. But I'm describing an occasion when I did something I found rewarding. So I'm going to have one main event. I'm not going to have too many characters. It's going to be me and maybe one other person. I need to think about where I'm going to set that story. I need it to be detailed. I need to show my thoughts and feelings, and I need to show that change and that development in what's going on. With the found rewarding, I need to think about ways that I can use synonyms to change those words, because I don't want to keep repeating the phrase, I found it rewarding, I found it rewarding. So perhaps I might talk about how it made me feel better, or how it improved my mental health, or how I enjoyed it. All right. And so I already know that I've got the what and the how in order to get my marks. So there is a little bit of a breakdown of how you'd go about it. One main event, sharp focus. Don't describe the whole day from the minute you get up. We don't want to know that you got up at 6 o'clock in the morning and then you did this and then you did the other. You want to have that really clear structure with a beginning, a middle and an end. Focus in, give a sense of where it took place, detailed writing, and try and show how something changed inside you or someone else as a result of it. Okay, so there's the mark scheme again. It breaks it down into what you're doing. 45 minutes to write, aiming to write between 5 and 6 paragraphs. About 2 sides, depending on your handwriting. And there are some more ideas of what you might like to have a go at. Obviously, if you pause that now, you'd be able to have a go at some of those questions. Okay, so here are 2 examples for you. There's one description and one narration to try and show you the difference between the two. So if you have a look at the description, it focuses in really closely on the senses. Foggy fumes invaded my nostrils, making it difficult to breathe. The usual morning commute was chaos as usual. Pedestrians barged past each other, bumping arms and legs as they made their way to the daily struggles. Can you see how that focuses in on detail? It's looking at the senses. So the narration, how is that different? Same setup. I was late again. Through the bustling streets, I hurried as quickly as I could in the hope that I would still be able to make the train. It was a desperate attempt, I admit. It was highly unlikely I'd be able to traverse across the city centre in rush hour in less than 3 minutes. Can you see the difference? The narration is focused on the I, what I'm doing, what the character is doing, hurrying through. It's still descriptive, there's still detail there, but it's about the character trying to make their way through. In the description, it's a focus on what that is like in that moment, describing what it's like there. Okay. So it's really hard, and I know lots of you will really hate this part of the paper because you just don't know what to write. So how can you generate ideas in the exam? Well, just keep it simple, keep it brief. Even in the narration or the description, you only need a really short moment in time. Think about it a little bit like EastEnders. You arrive in the middle of the action, you create that excitement, you don't linger around and describe everything. Definitely don't have too many characters, definitely don't use too much dialogue, and keep it real. Base it on something you know, really simple stuff. So you need to think about it as a job. It just needs to be done. Get that idea and then hook into it. Hook onto the keyword and then make it up. Right? If you really can't think of a time when you felt rewarded or a time when you felt challenged, make it up, but base it on something you know so it is real. Take that nugget and build around it, but keep it simple, keep it local, and don't be afraid to take ideas or good words or good sentence structures from other pieces of writing. You just can't copy stuff verbatim. You can't copy it word for word. Perfectly okay to use ideas from somewhere else. So jot down a plan, make sure you've got it, spider diagrams like this one, or you could try this one, H space, hook, setting, person, action, change, ending point. So there's lots of different ways that you could think about that writing. And then obviously when you're writing, you do need to be thinking about showing, not telling. So I don't want to know that the bully was really tall because that's quite boring. If I hear the bully towered over me, I'm working it out for myself. I'm a bit more active, a bit more engaged. So show, not tell is really important. And then what I've done is I've broken down a whole pile of different descriptive techniques for you. So this is worth having a look at, but I'm going to whiz through it now because I'm aware that there's not much time. So what I've done is I've told you what the Oasis map techniques are. Definitely look them up if you don't know any of them. And then I've shown you a piece of writing with the Oasis map techniques in them to give you some ideas of what it looks like. Okay, and then I've broken them down for you and you can go back and look at those ones. So then another challenge for you if you wanted to have a go at it, write a descriptive paragraph about a day trip which stands out, whether it's positive or negative. Then it gives you 5 things to include, look, and then it asks you to proofread and check some key things. Well worth thinking about that proofreading when you're doing it. And then there are some challenges for you again. So can you write a one-line description of a man who's smiling coldly? Can you write a one-line description of a man who's smiling coldly using the word Arctic? And then there's another one there for you as well. Choice of verbs is really important in the exam. So rather than saying I saw, could you say that she spotted or noticed or sighted? Instead of saying I looked, could I say that I gazed or I stared or I peered? Thinking about that variety of vocabulary can make a massive difference in this writing exam. Then dialogue is good, but don't overdo it. And then all we've got at the end are a couple of example answers for you. So a couple which show you how to reach different bands. This one reaches the band 4, and there's some techniques there that they've done, some things that they've used. And then there's a band 5, a really good answer, one of the AA star answers for you. So top tips for this exam. Make sure that you're really thinking about your task and your audience. Make sure you match that tone. Make sure you've got a range of ideas and develop those points and arguments. Don't change your point of view halfway through. Make sure you stay logical and sort of coherent all the way through. Have a clear sequence to your writing. Use the techniques, but don't overdo it. Keep it natural. Vary your sentencing and your vocab and make sure you proofread it, but also be ambitious. Reach, challenge yourself. Try and reach for the best you can be. And then there is a waggle of what a good one looks like for the report on the local council about last year's music festival. Then I've given you another waggle for a letter. So this is the opening of a letter objecting or giving views on the proposal for a music festival. I've given you the mark scheme again, and that is the end of the piece. So thank you very much for coming. I hope that's given you some ideas. And next week, when we come to do this, what we'll be doing is we'll be looking at the Unit 3 paper. So I will be going through the reading section next week, and the week after I'll be looking at the argumentation, the persuasion and the instruction writing. So we'll be looking at that paper, the Unit 3 paper, and doing the writing section in 2 weeks' time. So I hope you've managed to get some ideas from this. If you want to go back now, you'd be able to look at the different tasks, and obviously using this mark scheme, you'd be able to check and look over how to go about marking it. So you'd be able to see how well you've done. If you don't not sure of anything that I've mentioned this evening, you could always go and have a chat with your teacher and maybe print out something that you're not sure of and take it to them. I'd also suggest that if you're practicing at home, take them in, get somebody to look at them for you so they can give you an idea of how you're done. So thank you very much for coming this evening. Hope everything's gone well for you, and I will see you hopefully next week. Goodbye.